Asihlabe asihliza isabelo mali amaqembu aphikisayo ezepolitiki kuleli. Okhalezi mathonzi amaqembu aphikisayo kwelasenije ngumphumela wekhotho kanti izwe laseGhana selibe izwe lokuqala ukuhlomula ngomnokoloto we-COVID-19 ngohlelo lwe-World Health Organization. Kanti uyelulama esibhedlela umdlali wegalofu uTiger Woods ngemva kwengozi yemoto. Asinibingelele ke sinamukele weSizulu kuGalaxy TV kanti udaba lwethu oluphambili yilolu. Amaqembu aphikisayo kuleli asesihlabe asihliza isabelo mali sikaNgqongqoshe Tito Mboweni nasithelwe izolo nalapha esishoda ngezindlela ezintsha zokufula umnotho wakuleli. Udokotela Mbuyiseni Ndlozi weqembu le-Economic Freedom Fighters uthi uhulumeni wakuleli kumele avule indlela yokusebenzisa imali nezokwenza inzuzo kuhulumeni. Kanti iqembu le-Democratic Alliance nalikhale ngemali yentela elithe kufanele uhulumeni ayimise ukuyikhuphula kwayo njengalokhu izoshaya kuzwele kakhulu kwabadla imbuya ngothi. Liqembu lithi kufanele uhulumeni aphinde amise ukuhlangula izimboni zakhe ezikakuyizikweletu zezimali.
Well, the budget is a poor attempt which is not going to result in any structural reforms of the South African economy. What are these structural conditions of the South African economy is that majority of the wealth and economic activity benefits white people. The fact that there is chronic and rising unemployment that has characterized South Africa's economy for more than 3 decades. Nothing in the budget is going to change that reality. There is nothing or no promise that is going to result in more localization of production happening. So it is basically cognitive dissonance, the terrible attitude that the ANC government suffers of doing the same thing which does not work, and they keep doing it even if presented with evidence that it doesn't work. They insist on doing it. There was no mention at all of illicit financial flows, how you're going to deal with that. There's a lot of tax that is being drained by big corporations through all types of illegal activities. It's not just the tobacco industry. You're talking big corporations like mine in the mining industry, as well as auditing firms that are facilitating illicit financial flows out of the continent and out of South Africa. There's nothing in the budget that's going to result in a job for young black people tomorrow. There's nothing in the budget that is going to have us have any new economic activity. They are trying to go back to
an uninspiring budget speech at the time when South Africa needs inspiration and a clear program of action from government. Why do we say that? It seems like the budget speech intended to maintain the status quo rather than to try and take the South African economy out of the troubles and the problems it finds itself. There is no clear growth strategy there, for instance. There is no strategy about how to reduce unemployment, how to create jobs and reduce inequality. I'm not sure if you saw, and I did not see any of that. We are disappointed that once again the government decided to favor the private or the corporate sector instead of reducing value-added tax, because when they increased it, they said it was a temporary measure. But now they've decided to incentivize the private sector once more, which embarked on an investment strike even at the time when it was reduced to 28%. You will recall that, for example, if you were to look at personal income tax, it contributes about 500 billion rands. Your value-added tax, 350 billion rands, and corporate income tax, a minuscule amount of 200 billion rands. So it made sense to cut VAT and increase corporate income tax. But we are happy that they did not introduce any tax increases for the public. It's a welcome relief.
To some extent, a very measured budget. It's got both things that we appreciate and also things that we are very much concerned about. For example, the fact that there will be 11 billion that will be allocated for government youth employment, and also the 4 billion that will go to local economy. Those were the things that the IFP actually expected, and the fact that there will be no tax increases, we appreciate that very much. But on the other side, there's something that are very concerned, that the Minister mentioned, but in a very low tone. The issue of government debt, which is forever increasing. Now it's going for over 5 trillion. The issue of the wage bill, which is a serious problem. And we were also surprised that the minister didn't speak much about the issue of SOEs. Yet we know for a fact that there will be monies that will be allocated to state-owned entities like South African Airways, but he chose not to say anything about that. So those are the things that we are worried about. But in all honesty, he was very measured, and we appreciate even the fact that the grants will be increased, but that is not much money, because he spoke about 10 rands here, 10 rands there, 30 rands here, 30 rands there, which is not much of a money. So, but at the end of the day, half a loaf and no bread.
Do you trust the fact that we are going to get a surplus in 2025, just like the minister has promised?
We only hope, as he spoke about hope, because unless government puts so much emphasis in terms of people accounting, then it's only then, and if we do not keep all these inefficiencies that he spoke about, inefficient in local government, in all spheres of government, there are fruitless expenditures, there are wasteful expenditures because of people who are in the system but who shouldn't be there. And also when it comes to the wage bill, they are proposing that there should be some salary cuts, of which we oppose as IFP. We're only saying that let them do the audit and see that those departments that are overstaffed, they transfer staff to those departments that are actually understaffed. If there are new vacancies, they must look from within to see how can they place those people.
Don't worry. Firstly, the minister has been consistent that he believes that we have reached a point of inflection as far as the standard taxes are, and that increasing those taxes will not necessarily yield more revenue and also will have a negative effect on the economy. So the minister has been consistent. So today's announcement to reduce by 1% is in line with the trend the minister announced a year ago. Secondly, he also has said that has to go hand in hand with base broadening and addressing some of those abuses. So we work hand in hand with the policy to create the additional revenue from more effective collection than simply hiking the rates. The 40 billion that the minister has now postponed is in response. When we planned it a year ago, we didn't know that the pandemic would be as devastating as it was. It would be unwise not to respond to that. And so leaving that 40 billion in the economy for now has a helpful multiplier effect for jobs and consumption. And then signposting that a year from now, a further reduction will come, gives the market certainty about directionally where the minister is going. So we are not concerned because we believe there is still a lot of room to improve the efficiency of collection, and we can bring about, and that's why the 3 billion today additional announcement for additional skills, for deepening our capability for AI, machine learning by expanding and increasing the use of data, and also building our technology platform. All of those things will help us to be more efficient in our collection and takes the burden off the minister to just look at the rates.
We've just finished the budget speech here in Parliament behind me, and the DA can't help but feel disappointed by what we heard from the minister today, and also by what we didn't hear. Firstly, we are actually for the first time that I can recall seeing cuts in the social welfare, social grants budget, which means that at the same time as that we are getting more bailouts for SAA, Eskom and the Land Bank, those are being paid for by the very poorest and most vulnerable in our society by lower social grants or increases in those grants which are way below inflation, so real decreases. Secondly, the minister said that he wasn't going to increase taxes, but actually we saw 27 cents per litre increase in the fuel tax. What that means is that if you get to work on a taxi or on a bus, those fares are going to go up. Food prices will go up as goods need to be moved around the country. So this is a budget that actually increases the cost of living for those who can afford it the least at the moment, who are going through the hardest time at the moment. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we don't think the minister gave enough to purchasing vaccines for COVID-19. What we really need to do is vaccinate as many South Africans as possible, as quickly as possible, so that we can get back to some degree of normality and get our economy going again. What we saw was that we will be buying vaccines for the next 3 years. That is way too slow, too little and too late. We need to get those vaccines here as quickly as possible.
South Africa is defined by a huge crisis of poverty, of unemployment, and of huge inequalities. The crisis of unemployment is even much deeper because during the lockdown period, an additional 2 million South Africans who were working before lost their jobs, meaning that we have got close to 11 million people in South Africa currently that do not have jobs. The most backward thing any minister can ever do under these conditions is to implement austerity measures, which are budget cuts, because such is going to narrow the revenue base is going to deepen poverty, is not going to create the necessary jobs that we need to get out of the poverty crisis. So what we think should happen as the economic freedom fighters is that National Treasury must use its current regulatory power to localize procurement, meaning that a minimum of 80% of the goods and services that the state consumes and procures must be made in South Africa. In that way, we're going to be able to create sustainable and dependable jobs for millions of South Africans who are currently jobless. So we hope that the budget is going to move towards localization, implement the localization that has been spoken about on several occasions and has never found a clearer and cogent policy expression. So this must be the beginning of localization as part of reindustrializing South Africa, of building sectors that are going to create jobs for our people. That is our position.
Uphiko labaphenyi IPD luphenya abasole ngokuhlomula ngokungemthetho ezimalini zenhlangano ekhokha izimpesheni zikahulumeni kuleli isasa. Lolu phenyo luze ngemva kokuvela kwezindaba zokuthi khona abathile abahlomula ngezizumbulu kulomnyango. Kanti lolu phenyo kubheka ukuthi luphendule amatafula njengaloko komnyango kwavela ukuthi udonsa kanzima ngasezimalini.
Yo. 50 seconds to the spot on the right hand side. I'm warning you, I'm going to use a water cannon against you.
It was when I was inside the offices of Starsat that I realized that the police were spraying. This very MSWELI, asked the police to stop what they were doing because I didn't think it was a good thing for them to do. So I'm clarifying publicly that this MSWELI can never, ever ask the police to spray the people, worst of all, people with vulnerability.
Some of them are in crashes and they are there. They are looking on their life, that their life is on this. So we should have been really very situational and work together with whoever was there to make sure that the issue here was social distancing. That social distancing didn't need the approach we used. The approach we used was the approach for the people that are rioting to use. Yes, we did not use stun grenade, but we used water cannon. Those are people that are rioting. So we should not have really done that. And then you find people that are going there for leisure.
Amaqembu aphikisayo ezweni laseNiger akhala yazithulisa ngakubizwa ukubanjwa inkunzi emini ngemva kokukhishwa imiphumela yokhetho kuleli yazwe. Lolu khetho luqale ngomgqibelo weviki ledlule luveza ukuthi lowo yilungu lenhlangano ebusayo Mohamed Bazoum nguyena onqobe lolu khetho. Kanti iqembu eliphikisayo lolu khetho belungavulelekile futhi luntshontshiwe njengalokhu uhulumeni ehlelekile ukwenza lube njengokungelasisihla.
Niger's ruling party candidate has been declared the winner of a presidential runoff, though his opponent has alleged fraud and opposition supporters are lighting fires in the streets.
Mohamed Bazoum.
The Electoral Commission said on Tuesday that Mohamed Bazoum won 55.75% of the vote, results that will need to be ratified by the Constitutional Court. It's an election that's meant to bring about Niger's first democratic transition from one leader to another, with President Mahamadou Issoufou stepping down after 2 5-year terms. But shortly before the results were announced, the campaign of former President Mahamudu Usman alleged widespread fraud, including the theft and stuffing of ballot boxes and threats against voters. No evidence was provided. Usman's spokesperson Falke Basharu said nothing can oppose the will of the people, and he urged Nigerians to mobilise. Supporters of the former president, who was ousted in a 1996 coup, have heeded that call. Protesters burned tyres outside Usman's campaign headquarters and in other parts of the capital, Niamey. Police fired tear gas to disperse them. The Electoral Commission has not yet commented on the allegations of irregularities.
Izwe laseGhana selibengo lokuqala ukuhlomula ngomnokoloto we-COVID-19 ngohlelo lokwabelana ngawo olusungulwe inhlangano i-World Health Organization. Izolo lomnokoloto uthelekile kwelaseGhana kanti inhlangano i-World Health Organization ithi namanye amazwe angamile kahle kwezezimali azolekelelwa kulolu hlelo.
The World Health Organization's global vaccine sharing scheme delivered its first shots on Wednesday as a race to protect the world's poorest people accelerates. A flight carrying 600,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine arrived in Ghana's capital Accra, the WHO and UNICEF said in a joint statement, kickstarting a campaign that Ghanaian health officials said would prioritise frontline health workers and others at high risk of infection. COVAX was launched in June to prevent poorer countries from being pushed to the back of the queue for COVID-19 vaccines. Nevertheless, wealthier nations have since bought up billions of doses and forged ahead with mass immunisation campaigns. COVAX wants to close a politically sensitive gap by delivering 1.8 billion free vaccines to less developed economies, with the aim of inoculating up to 20% of those countries' populations. That's not enough, however, to achieve herd immunity. And on Tuesday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus urged wealthier nations to share their vaccines, saying that the goal of equitable distribution was in jeopardy.
210 million doses of vaccine have been administered globally, but half of those are in just 2 countries.
According to a Reuters tally, Ghana has suffered more than 80,000 infections and 580 deaths. Africa's reported death toll passed 100,000 last week, a fraction of those on other continents, but rising fast as a second wave of infections overwhelms hospitals. COVAX said this month that it had allocated the first tranche of 330 million doses of vaccines for 145 countries, including several in West Africa.
Umengameli waseMelika uJoe Biden uthi uzobhekana ngqo ngeziqu zamehlo nezwe laseChina kanye nezinkinga zokushintsha kwesimo semvelo. UBiden ube nomhlangano nendunankulu wezwe laseCanada uJustin Trudeau nalapho benze izivumelwano zokusebenzisana phakathi kwalamazwe. Kanti labo babili baphinde bavumelana ukuthi bazosebenzisana ukulwisana nobhubhane lwe-COVID-19 oselibhuqabhuqa amakhulu ezinkulungwane kwelaseMelika.
U.S. President Joe Biden held his first bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Tuesday, where climate change and China took center stage. Seeking to turn the page on former U.S. President Donald Trump's unorthodox foreign policy, Biden reiterated his commitment to the U.S.-Canada relationship and pledged to work together on achieving net zero emissions by 2050.
We also doubled down on our efforts to tackle climate change. It was really encouraging. Now that the United States is back in the Paris Agreement, we intend to demonstrate our leadership in order to spur other countries to raise their own ambitions. Canada and the United States are going to work in lockstep to display the seriousness of our commitment at both home and abroad.
Trudeau also thanked Biden for the U.S.'s support, calling for the release of 2 Canadians detained by China, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. They were arrested by Beijing in 2018 on espionage charges after Canada's detention of the chief financial officer of Huawei on a U.S. arrest warrant. The bilateral meeting comes shortly after Biden irritated Canada by blocking the multi-million-dollar Keystone XL oil pipeline project and proposing a Buy American program aimed at directing U.S. spending toward domestic manufacturers. but both leaders made clear they wanted to put the dispute behind them and strengthen their alliance.
Izikhulu eziphezulu zenkampani zobuchwepheshe bamakhompyutha Microsoft izivikele ezinyathelweni zayo yaseyisola izigelekeqe zaseRussia ngokuputshwa kwemininingwane eyimfihlo. Lokhu kuvele ngesikhathi kulele ubufakazi baleli cala phakathi kwethimba libika kuhulumeni waseMelika. Kanti ngaphambi kokuqala ukulalela ubufakazi, leli thimba lisola izikhulu eziphezulu zenkampani Amazon ngokungavuma ukuzofakaza ekubeni zazi kahle kamhlophe ukuthi kwasetshenziswa izinsiza kusebenza zayo ukuputshuza le mininingwane. Kanti uma sibuye ekhefeni lifuna izindlela ezintsha zokwenza inzuzo ibhange laseNgilandi.
Make massive moves. The space race has already started.
Russia had got the first object into space.
The coast is as wild today as it was when Europeans settled the continent.
Enormous beasts with enormous thirst. The teams are primed and ready.
They got the first animal into space, and they've got the first person.
Time to see what the boys can do.
Make massive moves with Starsat. Make massive moves.
How can you say that?
That is what it is.
Your mother eloped with someone else.
I just think this is such a genius idea. I think it's amazing.
I can be happy.
It's inside you. It's inside of all of us.
It's about cooking smart that are nutritious and delicious.
President Trump acknowledging the coronavirus death toll could be significantly higher.
You don't want to do this. There is nothing you can take.
Jerusalem. Surviving roommates scared.
The heavyweights arrive.
Inside finds Petulia, blocked by Jane.
This is the will of God.
Make massive moves with Starsat. Make massive moves.
Deceiver!
There isn't any time to waste then.
We can't save everyone in this war.
One moment, that's all we got.
You're locked in here with me.
Make massive moves with Starsat.
Siphinde sinamukele kwesiZulu Galaxy TV kanti debele lethu liphambili ke besibike ukuthi la sihlatshe sahlikizwe isabelo mali sikamongameli sikanqongqoshe wezezimali uTito Mboweni. Kanti uma sihlabela phambili samukele udaba lokuthi ke isikhumulo sezindiza kwelaseNgilandi iHeathrow Airport ithi kuze kusimame kuphinde kubuyele ukuhamba esimeni kwezindiza emazweni konke kubalekile ukuthi abantu bahlole izikhumulweni ukuthi abanalo negciwane noma izinkomba zeCovid-19. Lesi sikhumulo sikhiphela umbono ngemva ukuthi uhulumeni kulelizwe ememezele ukuthi kungenzeka kubuyele esimeni ukusebenza kwezindiza ngenyanga kaNhlaba nonyaka uma isimo sibangcuba ngcono.
It's a flashback to years past. Britain's Heathrow Airport saw passenger numbers fall 73% last year to levels not seen since the 1970s. It said Wednesday it plunged to a $2.8 billion annual loss due to the global health crisis. 22 million people travelled through the airport, half of those in the first 2 months of the year before most global lockdowns. Heathrow also lost its title as the busiest airport in Europe to Paris as its flight schedules contracted more than its rivals. Now the London hub is desperate to get passengers back in the skies and has called on the UK government to help out. The airport wants rapid digital health checks to replace the current paper-based system, and it's called for business tax breaks for big airports. Now there is some cause for optimism at Heathrow, which is just outside the capital. It hopes travel markets will reopen from mid-May after the British government announced lockdown restrictions would be eased during the coming months.
Izimoto zikagesi zesikhondla senkampani iHyundai zizobuyisela emuva ngemva kokuvela ukuthi ama-PETROS aweke zingene elifanele zokuphepha. Ukubuyisela kwezimoto kuza ngemva kokuthi kuvele ukuthi amabhetri azo abamba umlilo ongadala ubungozi. Kanti le nkampani yasebenzisa imali engango-$900 million aseMelika ukuqala lo hlobo lwalezi zimoto.
Hyundai Motor is set to replace the batteries in some 82,000 electric vehicles over risks they could catch fire. Combined with an earlier recall, the problem looks set to cost the automaker about $900 million. The latest move mainly applies to its best-selling EV, the Kona. It was first recalled in October for a software upgrade after a series of fires. But in January, one of the upgraded cars then caught fire, prompting South Korean authorities to probe whether the first recall was adequate. The unit of LG Chem which makes the battery said Hyundai had misapplied its suggestions regarding battery management. It said the batteries themselves were not the fire risk. There have been 15 cases of fires involving the Kona EV. Most were in South Korea, but there were 2 in Canada and 1 each in Finland and Austria. Hyundai Motor shares were down close to 4% in afternoon trade on Wednesday.
Nina bakabusha bukhali sasiguqisa isizulu ngalesikhathi sihlangabezeni futhi kusasa ngesikhathi esifanayo malibe luhle usuku.